Bullies tried to slap the new girl's cheek. Big mistake. She was a brutal fighter. Elena Torres stood at the entrance of Riverside High School, her fingers nervously adjusting the straps of her faded backpack for what felt like the 100th time in just a few minutes. The early morning sun stretched long shadows across the sprawling concrete building, and the constant stream of students pouring through the main doors reminded her of a river flowing around an immovable boulder. She was that boulder, stationary and separate from the current. At 16 years old, Elena had mastered the art of invisibility, or so she believed. This marked her fourth school in 5 years, each relocation determined by her father's military deployments. Every transfer demanded she reconstruct herself from nothing, like a phoenix that never quite managed to ignite into flame. The corridors of Riverside High stretched wider than those of her previous school. The walls were painted an institutional cream colour that somehow managed to leach the vitality from the harsh fluorescent lighting overhead. Display cases lined the main hallway, packed with decades' worth of athletic trophies and academic plaques. Each one stood as a monument to a legacy she would never belong to. Elena had learned long ago not to examine these shrines to permanence too closely. There was no sense in growing attached to things that would soon fade into distant memories. Her assigned locker was number 624, tucked into a quiet corner near the biology wing where student traffic ran lighter. She had specifically requested a location removed from the main thoroughfares during registration, claiming she needed a quiet space for studying between classes. The registrar had given her an understanding look, the expression of someone who had seen countless shy newcomers trying to find their footing, and granted the request without hesitation. Eleanor spun the combination lock with practiced precision, the numbers already committed to memory. 27-19-36, the same combination she had used at her last 3 schools, a minor constant in a life defined by variables. Inside, she methodically arranged her textbooks by subject and period, establishing a system that would minimize her time spent at the locker during passing periods. Every second spent lingering in the hallways was another second she could be observed, assessed, classified. She had learned this harsh lesson at Jefferson Middle School, where she had made the critical error of decorating her locker with photographs from her martial arts studio on the very first day. The questions had been relentless, and the unwanted attention had painted a target on her back for the remainder of that semester. Standing at 5'3", with a frame that appeared delicate beneath her deliberately oversized sweatshirts, Elena did not project an intimidating presence. Her wavy dark hair possessed a will of its own, refusing to cooperate with any styling products or tools, so she had surrendered to letting it fall naturally past her shoulders. The thick-framed glasses she wore served dual purposes. Her eyesight was genuinely poor without them, and they functioned as a barrier concealing deep brown eyes that her mother insisted were her most striking feature. But Eleanor had no interest in features that drew attention. She wanted to blend into the background, to become white noise, or better yet, no noise whatsoever. What no one at Riverside High could possibly know, what she took extraordinary measures to ensure they would never discover, was that beneath the baggy clothing and quiet demeanor existed a body refined by 10 years of intensive martial arts training. Her father, Daniel Torres, had begun teaching her Brazilian jiu-jitsu when she was 6 years old, shortly after their first assignment to military base housing. She could still recall that initial lesson in their cramped garage, the mats he had spread out carrying the scent of rubber and promise. "It's not about size, Elena," he had told her, demonstrating a simple armbar that appeared deceptively straightforward. "It's about leverage, timing, and above all, discipline. The strongest person in any room is the one who knows they could prevail in any confrontation but chooses not to engage at all." Those early sessions had felt like games to her, rolling around on the mats with her father, learning to redirect an opponent's momentum against them, discovering that her smaller stature could actually become an advantage when properly utilized. By age 9, she had incorporated mixed martial arts into her training schedule, dedicating 4 hours every evening to whatever gym they could locate near each new base. She had earned her black belt in BJJ at 13, one of the youngest students in her academy's history, though there had been no one consistent enough in her life to celebrate the achievement besides her parents. The muscles she had developed were lean and functional rather than bulky, concealed beneath carefully selected clothing. She had learned to walk with a slight stoop, to move with calculated awkwardness that suggested clumsiness rather than the feline grace her training had instilled. In physical education classes, she performed adequately enough to pass without drawing attention. During the annual fitness assessments, she made certain to struggle visibly with push-ups she could execute one-handed, to breathe heavily after runs that barely elevated her heart rate. The first bell sounded, a harsh electronic tone that reminded Elena of the alarm system at their base housing in Japan. She closed her locker and merged with the stream of students heading toward first period, maintaining a lowered gaze and steady pace. Advanced chemistry with Mr. Chen was located in room 147 on the second floor of the East Wing. She had already memorized the school's layout during orientation, identifying not only her classrooms, but alternate routes, secluded stairwells, and potential sanctuary spaces. The classroom was approximately half occupied when she arrived. Students gathered in familiar clusters, their conversations creating a comfortable hum of shared history. Elena selected a seat in the fourth row from the front, 3 seats from the window, visible enough to avoid appearing antisocial, yet not prominent enough to attract attention. She extracted her notebook and began transcribing the objectives written on the whiteboard, her handwriting neat and unremarkable. "Is anyone sitting here?" Elena glanced up to find a girl with bright eyes and a warm smile standing beside the empty desk next to her. She wore her curly hair in a high ponytail and radiated an energy that seemed barely contained, like a sparkler just before ignition. "No, go ahead," Elena replied, offering a small smile in return. "I'm Jade," the girl announced, settling into the seat with easy confidence. "You're new, right? I think I saw you at orientation last week." "Elena," she responded, then added, "Yeah, just transferred here." "Military family?" Jade asked, with the casual understanding of someone who had witnessed enough new students to recognize the pattern. Elena nodded, surprised by her perceptiveness. "My uncle's family relocates constantly too," Jade explained. "Navy. It's rough, always being the new kid, but Riverside's not terrible once you figure out who to avoid." Before Eleanor could inquire further, Jade was already pulling out a colour-coded notebook and an impressive collection of highlighters. "Fair warning about this class," Jade said. "Mr. Chen is brilliant, but he lectures at light speed. I'll share my notes if you need them while you're getting up to speed." It was a simple kindness offered without expectation, and Eleanor felt something in her chest loosen slightly. "Thanks, that's really considerate of you." "No problem," Jade said, then lowered her voice as more students filed in. "Oh, and heads up, see those guys coming in now? The one with the perfectly styled hair and the 2 following him like lost puppies? That's Carter Blackwood and his crew. Stay clear if you can. They enjoy making sport of people, especially anyone they perceive as weak or different." Elena followed Jade's gaze toward the doorway where 3 boys had entered with the kind of swagger that suggested ownership not just of the classroom, but the entire institution. The one in front, Carter apparently, possessed the kind of dark good looks that belonged in a teen magazine. His hair was indeed impeccably styled, his clothes expensive without being ostentatious, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never encountered meaningful resistance. Behind him, a massive boy who appeared constructed in a linebacker factory lumbered along, all shoulders and minimal neck. The third was tall and wiry with cold eyes that surveyed the room like he was cataloguing potential targets. They claimed seats in the back corner, their presence immediately altering the room's energy. Conversations became more subdued, students unconsciously angling away from that corner, as if avoiding the gravitational pull of a black hole. Eleanor noted all of this with the tactical awareness her father had drilled into her. Always assess your environment. Always identify potential threats. Always maintain an exit strategy. Mr. Chen entered then, a whirlwind of energy and enthusiasm that immediately commanded attention. He was young for a teacher, perhaps early 30s, with close-cropped hair and safety goggles already perched atop his head. "All right, brilliant minds," he announced. "Today we're diving into thermodynamics, and I promise it's far more exciting than it sounds. Can anyone tell me the first law?" The lesson proceeded at a breakneck pace, exactly as Jade had warned. Elena found herself fully engaged for the first time in weeks, her mind working to keep pace with the complex concepts and rapid-fire delivery. She had always excelled in science. The precision appealed to her, the way every action produced an equal and opposite reaction, the predictability of cause and effect. Unlike human behavior, chemical reactions followed rules that remained constant regardless of social hierarchies or unspoken codes. She was so absorbed in copying a particularly intricate equation that she failed to notice the small folded paper that landed on her desk until Jade subtly nudged her. Eleanor glanced at it, then surveyed the room. Several students were watching her with barely concealed interest. The paper had originated from the back corner. With a sinking sensation, she unfolded it. Written in careless handwriting, "Nice glasses, 4 eyes." Very 1990s librarian aesthetic. Eleanor crumpled the paper and deposited it into her backpack without reaction, returning her attention to the board. She could feel eyes on her, waiting for some response. Anger, embarrassment, tears. She gave them nothing, her expression remaining neutral as she continued taking notes. After a moment, the attention shifted away, disappointment hanging in the air like predators denied their prey. The remainder of class passed without incident, though Eleanor could sense occasional glances from the back corner, evaluating, calculating. When the bell rang, she packed up efficiently, but not so quickly as to appear like she was fleeing. "Hey," Jade said as they filed out. "Don't let them get to you. They're idiots with excessive free time and insufficient brain cells." "I'm fine," Eleanor assured her. And she was. She had endured far worse than juvenile notes. At her previous school, a group of girls had orchestrated a systematic campaign to destroy her reputation, spreading rumours that grew more elaborate with each retelling. She had weathered it all with the same stoic patience, knowing that eventually she would relocate and it would all become irrelevant. "What's your next class?" Jade asked. "A P history with Miss Harrison." "Oh, you're smart," Jade said with a grin. "I'm in regular history, barely keeping my head above water. But if you head down the main hallway and turn left at the trophy cases, her room is the 4th door on the right. You can't miss it. She has this enormous historical timeline that covers an entire wall." Eleanor thanked her and departed, noting Jade's friendliness as both a potential asset and liability. Friendships were complicated. They invited questions, expected reciprocity, noticed things. But they also provided camouflage, a social shield that could deflect unwanted attention. She would need to consider carefully how to proceed. The hallways between classes were pandemonium, a river of teenagers flowing in multiple directions, eddies forming around lockers and doorways, conversations shouted over the din. Elena navigated it all with practiced ease, using her smaller size to slip through gaps, never pushing but never stopping either. She had learned the rhythm of hallway traffic at enough schools to recognize the universal patterns. She was just rounding the corner near the trophy cases when it happened. A shoulder slammed into hers hard enough to send her stumbling. Her books went flying, papers scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Muscle memory kicked in. She could have easily converted the stumble into a controlled roll, could have maintained her grip on the books, could have avoided the collision entirely if she had wanted to reveal her capabilities. Instead, she allowed herself to fall to one knee, playing the part of the clumsy newcomer perfectly. "Watch where you're going," a voice said from above her. She looked up to find the massive linebacker from chemistry class, Blake, she thought Jade had called him, standing over her with a smirk that suggested the collision had been anything but accidental. A small crowd had formed, the universal teenage response to potential drama. "Sorry," Elena mumbled, beginning to gather her scattered belongings. "You should be," Blake said, making no move to assist. "These hallways are for people who belong here, not randoms who can't even walk straight." Behind him, she could see Carter and the lanky one, Ethan, watching with amusement. This was a test, she realized. They were establishing the hierarchy, positioning her early. It was a dance she had witnessed before, performed with minor variations at every school. She continued collecting her papers, keeping her movements deliberately clumsy, inefficient. A few other students helped, shooting disapproving looks at Blake but saying nothing. No one wanted to redirect his attention to themselves. "Butterfingers," Ethan called out, earning laughs from their immediate circle. Eleanor stood once she had everything, clutching her books to her chest in a way that made her appear smaller, more vulnerable. "I'll be more careful," she said quietly. "You better be," Blake replied, then shouldered past her again, just hard enough to make her take a step back. The crowd dispersed as the trio moved on, conversations resuming as if nothing had transpired. Elena reorganized her books and continued to Ms. Harrison's class, filing the encounter away in her mental catalogue of threats. Level 1 intimidation, basic dominance display. She had seen worse, endured worse. This was manageable. Ms. Harrison's classroom was indeed unmistakable. The promised timeline dominated one wall, and the room was filled with historical artifacts, propaganda posters from both world wars, a replica Declaration of Independence under glass, a bust of Washington that observed the classroom with marble eyes. Ms. Harrison herself was a petite woman with sharp features and greying hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look like she had stepped out of a historical photograph. "You must be Miss Torres," she said, as Eleanor entered. "Welcome to AP History. I see you've transferred in with exceptional grades. I trust you're prepared for the pace we maintain here?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena replied, appreciating her direct approach. No false warmth, no condescending concern for the new student, just expectations clearly stated. She took a seat near the middle of the room and was pleased to discover that none of Carter's crew was in this class. The students here radiated a different energy, focused, competitive, already extracting laptops and detailed notes from previous lessons. These were the overachievers, the ones with their sights set on prestigious universities and perfect GPAs. They had no time for the petty power games that dominated the general track classes. The lesson focused on the causes of the French Revolution, and Ms. Harrison conducted it like a university seminar, expecting participation and challenging every assertion. Elena found herself drawn into a discussion about the role of Enlightenment philosophy, carefully contributing enough to demonstrate engagement, but not enough to stand out as the newcomer trying too hard. By lunch, she had developed a clear map of the social terrain. The cafeteria was divided into distinct territories. The athletes dominated the central tables. The drama students claimed the area near the stage. The AP students clustered by the windows where they could spread out their homework. The outcasts and loners occupied the periphery, individual islands of isolation. Carter and his crew held court at what was clearly prime real estate, a large round table with perfect visibility of the entire cafeteria. Eleanor purchased a simple lunch, sandwich, apple, water, and headed for the library. She had located it during orientation, a quiet sanctuary on the third floor with strict rules about noise and behaviour that would keep the Carters of the world at bay. The librarian, Mrs. Park, barely glanced up as Eleanor entered, simply nodding toward the study carrels in the back. She chose one near the window where she could eat while pretending to study. Outside, she could see the athletic fields where PE classes were running laps in the autumn sunshine. She watched them with the detached interest of an anthropologist observing a foreign culture, noting the casual cruelties of making slower students run extra laps, the way certain students were invariably chosen last for teams. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How's the first day going, sweetheart?" Elena typed back, "Fine. Normal. Making friends? Working on it. Remember what we talked about? It's okay to let people in a little." Elena didn't respond to that. Her mother, Maria, had never quite understood the survival mechanism her daughter had developed. Maria was warm and outgoing, the kind of person who made friends in checkout lines and remembered the names of every server at their regular restaurants. She worried that Eleanor's reserve was unhealthy, that she was missing out on typical teenage experiences. But Maria hadn't been the new kid repeatedly. She hadn't learned that every friendship came with an expiration date, that every secret shared was potential ammunition, that caring too deeply about a place or person only made leaving more difficult. Daniel understood better, but even he sometimes looked at his daughter with concern, wondering if he had trained her too well in the art of defense, both physical and emotional. The afternoon classes passed in a blur of syllabi and expectations. English literature with Mrs. Patterson, who discussed Fitzgerald with the fervour of an evangelist. Pre-calculus with Mr. Kim, who had the disconcerting habit of calling on students randomly, keeping everyone on edge. PE with Coach Sullivan, where Eleanor carefully underperformed on the basic fitness assessment, making sure to breathe heavily after 15 push-ups she could do in her sleep. It was in PE that she had another encounter with Blake. They were assigned to the same group for the mile run assessment, and he made a point of passing her repeatedly, each time close enough that she had to veer slightly to avoid contact. "Try to keep up, 4 eyes," he called over his shoulder on his 4th lap. Elena maintained her steady, deliberately mediocre pace, finishing in the middle of the pack with a time that suggested average fitness rather than the 5-minute 40-second mile she could run when pushed. Coach Sullivan marked her time without comment, though Elena caught him watching her with a slightly puzzled expression, as if something didn't quite add up. In the locker room, she changed in a bathroom stall as she always did, emerging in her regular clothes just as the other girls were finishing up. She caught a few curious glances, but no one commented. It was unusual, but not unheard of. Plenty of girls were self-conscious about changing in front of others. "That Blake is such a jerk," one girl was saying as Elena packed up her gym clothes. "Did you see him trying to intimidate the new girl?" "Which new girl?" another asked. "The quiet one with the glasses. Elena, I think." Elena kept her head down, pretending not to hear. "Oh yeah, I heard Carter and his crew already have her marked. Ethan was telling everyone she's probably going to be their project this semester." That's so messed up. Remember what they did to that kid Marcus last year? He literally transferred schools mid-semester. Well, maybe someone should warn her. And make ourselves targets? No thanks. The conversation moved to other topics, but Elena had heard enough. She was officially on their radar, marked as prey. It was a familiar feeling, almost comfortable in its predictability. At least she knew where she stood. The final bell couldn't come soon enough. Elena had survived day 1, but she knew it was just the beginning. The real campaign would start once they realized she wasn't going to provide the entertainment they expected. No tears, no outbursts, no desperate attempts to fit in that they could mock. Her lack of reaction would escalate things. It always did. The predators would push harder, seeking the response they craved. She was at her locker packing up for the day when Jade appeared beside her. "Hey, you survived," Jade said cheerfully. "That's better than some new kids manage. Want to walk out together? Safety in numbers and all that?" Elena considered declining, but there was something genuine about Jade that was difficult to resist. "Sure." As they walked toward the exit, Jade chatted about teachers, upcoming assignments, and which cafeteria food to avoid unless you wanted food poisoning. It was comfortable, normal, the kind of conversation Elena imagined regular teenagers had all the time. They were just passing the gymnasium when Carter materialized in front of them, flanked as always by his loyal lieutenants. "Jade," he said with false warmth, "I didn't know you were into charity work now." "I didn't know you were into being a walking cliché, Carter," Jade shot back. "Seriously, the whole bullying thing is so outdated. Very early 2010s. Carter's smile tightened. "I'm just being friendly. Wanted to welcome our new student properly." He turned to Eleanor, his dark eyes scanning her with the calculating look of someone determining exactly how to inflict maximum damage. "Elena, right? I hope you're finding everything to your satisfaction." "It's fine," Elena said neutrally. "Just fine?" Ethan interjected with mock concern. "That's disappointing. We pride ourselves on our hospitality here at Riverside." "Maybe she just has high standards," Blake added with a smirk. "Coming from wherever backwater she crawled out of." "San Diego," Elena said quietly. "I came from San Diego." "California," Carter laughed. "That explains the fashion sense. Very West Coast grunge. I especially like the glasses. Very retro. What are those, your grandmother's?" A few passing students had slowed to watch the interaction, that universal teenage instinct for drama drawing them like moths to flame. "We should go," Jade said, taking Elena's arm. "No need to rush off," Carter said, stepping slightly to block their path. Not aggressively enough to be called out for it, but enough to make the power dynamic clear. "We're just getting to know each other, building community. Isn't that what high school's all about?" "I thought it was about education," Elena said, allowing a tiny edge into her voice. Carter's eyebrows rose slightly, surprised by even this small pushback. "Cute. She has a spine after all. This might be more entertaining than I thought." "Leave her alone, Carter," Jade said firmly. "Or what?" Ethan asked, his cold eyes fixing on Jade. "You'll report us for being friendly? I'm sure Principal Morgan would love to hear that complaint." It was a threat, subtle but clear. Carter's father was on the school board. His mother chaired the Parent-Teacher Association. They had influence, protection. It was why they could operate with such impunity. "Come on," Jade said, pulling Elena around them. This time Carter let them pass, but Elena could feel his eyes on her back as they walked away. "Well," Jade said once they were outside, "you're definitely on their radar now." "I'm sorry. I probably made it worse by standing up to them." "It's not your fault," Eleanor assured her. "People like that were always going to find a reason." "Yeah, but still, just be careful, okay? They can make life pretty miserable when they want to." Elena nodded, adjusting her backpack. "I'll be fine." She walked home alone, taking a circuitous route that allowed her to familiarize herself with the neighborhood. Their current house, she never thought of them as homes, was a modest two-story in a development that looked like it had been stamped from the same mold 100 times over. The only variation was the color of the shutters and the state of the lawns. Their lawn was immaculate, of course. Daniel Torres believed in maintaining standards, and that included a lawn that looked like it could pass military inspection. The garage door was open when she arrived, revealing the makeshift gym her father had already established. Heavy bag, speed bag, pull-up bar, weights, and most importantly, the mats that covered most of the floor space. "How was school?" her mother called from the kitchen as Elena entered. "Fine," Elena replied automatically, dropping her backpack by the stairs. Maria appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, her expression skeptical. "Fine. That's all I get." "It was school, Mum. Classes, teachers, homework, the usual." "Make any friends?" "Maybe. There's a girl named Jade who seems nice." Maria's face lit up. "That's wonderful. You should invite her over sometime." "It's the first day, Mom." "That would be weird." "It's never weird to make friends." "Honey." Elena didn't argue, just headed up to her room. It was still mostly boxes, only the essentials unpacked. Her bed, desk, computer, and one poster, a vintage Bruce Lee movie, print her father had given her for her 13th birthday. "Be like water," Bruce advised from the wall, and Elena had taken it to heart. Shapeless, adaptable, flowing around obstacles rather than confronting them directly. She started her homework, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of assignments and reading. This was safe, predictable. Math problems had right answers. History had dates and facts. Science had laws and theories. None of it required navigation of complex social dynamics or the exhausting performance of being less than she was. At 6 o'clock, her father called her down for training. Daniel Torres was not a large man, standing only 5'10", but he carried himself with the coiled readiness of someone always prepared for action. His hair, once dark like Elena's, was now more silver than brown, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen too much in too many places. "How was school?" he asked as they began their warm-up routine. "I was identified as a target by the local power structure," Elena reported, falling into the military brevity her father preferred. 3 males, seniors, with established patterns of harassment. No physical contact yet beyond intentional shoulder check, likelihood of escalation high. Daniel paused in his stretching. "Do you need me to intervene?" "Negative. Situation is manageable. You know the rules of engagement. Avoidance first, de-escalation second, physical response only when facing imminent harm or unable to retreat. And if you do have to engage, minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat and enable escape. No permanent damage, no showing off." Daniel nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now, let's work on your ground game. You're still telegraphing when you're about to attempt a sweep." For the next 2 hours, they trained with the focused intensity that had become their shared language. This was where Elena felt most herself. Not the shy new girl, not the underperforming student, but a trained fighter working to perfect her craft. Her father pushed her hard, never allowing her size or age to be an excuse. "In a real situation, your opponent won't care that you're smaller," he'd say, putting her in a chokehold she had to escape. "They won't go easy because you're young or female. Those things make you a target, so you turn them into advantages." By the time they finished, Eleanor was drenched in sweat, her muscles burning with the pleasant ache of hard work. They sat on the mats sharing a bottle of water, the comfortable silence of 2 people who understood each other without words. "You know," Daniel said finally, "you don't have to hide it forever. Your training, I mean." "Yes, I do," Eleanor replied. "The moment people know, everything changes. I become either a threat or a novelty. Either way, I stop being able to blend in." "Maybe blending in isn't as important as you think. Says the man who taught me that the element of surprise is the greatest tactical advantage." Daniel chuckled. "Fair point. But Elena, I worry sometimes that you're so focused on being invisible that you're forgetting to actually live." "I'm living. I'm just doing it quietly." The next few days followed a similar pattern. Elena attended classes, excelled academically while carefully managing her performance in anything physical, and endured escalating harassment from Carter and his crew. The shoulder checks became more frequent. Her books were knocked from her hands at least once a day. Notes appeared in her locker, each one cruder than the last. "Nice shirt. Did you raid a thrift store dumpster? I bet you smell as bad as you look. Nobody wants you here. Do everyone a favor and leave." She kept them all, filed in a folder in her backpack. Not as evidence, she had no intention of reporting anything, but as intelligence. The handwriting told her Ethan wrote most of them. The word choice suggested he was trying to impress Carter with his cruelty. The escalation pattern followed predictable lines. Jade tried to provide a buffer when she could, but they only had 2 classes together, and Elena discouraged her from getting too involved. They'll just target you too, Elena warned during a quiet moment in chemistry. Let them try, Jade said defiantly. I've dealt with jerks before. Not like these, Elena said, recognizing the particular brand of entitled cruelty that came from those who had never faced real consequences. The first real escalation came on Thursday. Elena was eating lunch in the library when Carter, Blake and Ethan appeared at her table. The library was supposed to be off-limits to their kind of behaviour, but Mrs. Park was nowhere to be seen. Eating alone again? Carter asked, sliding into the seat across from her. That's pathetic. Don't you have any friends? Eleanor didn't look up from her book. I'm reading. What fascinating literature has captured your attention? Ethan asked, snatching the book before she could react. To Kill a Mockingbird. How original. Let me guess. You identify with Boo Radley, the weird recluse everyone's afraid of. Give it back, Elena said calmly. Or what? Blake asked, moving to stand behind her chair, close enough that she could feel his presence looming. What are you going to do about it? This was the game. They wanted her to try to grab the book, to give them an excuse to escalate, or to get upset, to provide entertainment. Eleanor did neither, simply returning to eating her sandwich as if they weren't there. She's ignoring us, Ethan said with mock hurt. That's rude, don't you think? Very rude, Carter agreed. He opened the book and with deliberate slowness tore out a page. Elena's jaw tightened, but she didn't react. He tore out another, then another. Oops, Carter said. Looks like your book had an accident. Maybe you should be more careful with your things? He dropped the vandalized book on her lunch, the torn pages scattering across her food. Then they left, laughing, their point made. Elena looked at the destroyed book. It had been her personal copy, not a school one. A gift from her mother, who had inscribed it, "For my brave girl who always stands up for what's right." She carefully collected the torn pages, her hands steady despite the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. It wasn't about the book, she knew. It was about power, about establishing that they could take or destroy anything of hers without consequence. That evening, her training with her father was particularly intense. She channeled her frustration into every strike, every throw, every submission attempt. Daniel noticed, of course. You want to talk about it? He asked after a particularly aggressive series of combinations that would have seriously hurt someone who wasn't prepared for them. They destroyed my book today, Elena said. The one Mom gave me. Daniel's expression darkened. Did they touch you? No, just intimidation tactics, psychological warfare. Those can be just as damaging. I can handle it. I know you can. The question is whether you should have to. Elena reset her stance. Again, she said, not wanting to discuss it further. Friday brought a new development. Elena arrived at her locker to find it decorated with printed photos, unflattering. Pictures someone had taken of her throughout the week, each one annotated with cruel comments. Walks like a penguin. Eating alone as always. Even her hair is trying to escape. A small crowd had gathered to see her reaction. She could feel their anticipation, their hunger for drama. With deliberate calm, she removed each photo, folded them neatly, and placed them in her backpack with the notes. Then she opened her locker and proceeded with her normal routine as if nothing had happened. Doesn't anything bother you? A voice asked. She turned to find Ethan watching her with those cold eyes, genuinely curious. Should it? Elena responded. Most people would be crying by now. Or angry, or something. I'm not most people. No, Ethan agreed, and there was something calculating in his expression. You're not. That's what makes this interesting. He walked away, leaving Eleanor with the unsettling feeling that she had just passed some kind of test, but not in a good way. Her lack of reaction wasn't deterring them. It was intriguing them, making her more of a challenge. The weekend provided a brief respite. Eleanor spent Saturday helping her mother unpack the last of the boxes, setting up the house that would never quite feel like home. Maria chatted as they worked, filling the silence with stories from her own high school days, trying to connect with her daughter through shared experience. "I remember this one girl, Jennifer Martinez," Maria said, carefully unwrapping dishes. "She made my junior year miserable. She spread rumors that I had stolen her boyfriend, which was ridiculous because I had never even talked to him. But everyone believed her because she was popular, and I was just the theater kid." "What did you do?" Elena asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "I confronted her right in the middle of the cafeteria. Told her to stop lying about me, or I would tell everyone about the time she cheated on the SATs. "Did she?" "She backed off. Bullies usually do when you stand up to them." Elena didn't point out that her mother's situation had been different. Jennifer Martinez hadn't had two large male friends backing her up. She hadn't had parents with influence in the school system. And most importantly, the social dynamics of the 1990s were different from today, where every confrontation could be recorded, edited, and shared online within minutes. Sunday was training day. Daniel had arranged for them to visit a local MMA gym where Eleanor could spar with opponents who didn't know her, who wouldn't hold back because she was the coach's daughter. She wore nondescript workout clothes and kept her head down as they entered. But once on the mats, she transformed. Her first opponent was a woman in her 20s who clearly thought the teenager would be an easy warm-up. Elena let her think that for about 30 seconds, then executed a perfect takedown that left the woman tapping out in surprise. The second opponent, warned by the first, came at her more seriously but still underestimated her speed. Elena moved like water, flowing around attacks, finding openings that shouldn't exist, applying pressure in ways that seemed to defy physics. "Your girl's good," the gym owner told Daniel as they watched Elena roll with her third opponent, a man twice her size whom she was systematically dismantling with technique and patience. "She's better than good," Daniel replied with quiet pride. "She just doesn't know it yet." Monday arrived too quickly, bringing with it the familiar dread of another week at Riverside High. Elena had just settled into her first period chemistry class when the announcement came over the PA system. "Elena Torres, please report to the guidance counselor's office. Elena Torres to guidance." She could feel every eye in the room on her as she gathered her things. Carter, from his corner seat, gave her a mocking salute. Jade shot her a concerned look. The guidance counselor, Mr. Martinez, was a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a collection of motivational posters that made his office look like an inspirational calendar come to life. "Sit down, Elena," he said warmly. "I wanted to check in with you. How are you settling in?" "Fine," Eleanor replied automatically. "I know transitioning to a new school can be challenging, especially mid-semester. Are you making friends?" "Some." "Any problems? Anyone giving you trouble?" Here it was. The moment where she could report everything, show the photos, the notes, describe the harassment. Mr. Martinez would probably take it seriously, would probably try to help. But Elena knew how this played out. Even if Carter and his crew were punished, it would only make things worse. They would be more careful, more subtle, more vicious. And she would be marked forever as the snitch who couldn't handle things herself. "No problems," Elena said. Mr. Martinez studied her for a moment. "You know, my door is always open if you need to talk about anything. And everything said in this office is confidential, unless you're in danger of hurting yourself or others." "I appreciate that. I've looked at your transcripts. You're an excellent student. I hope you'll consider getting involved in some extracurricular activities. It's a great way to meet people, find your tribe." "I'll think about it." Mr. Martinez handed her a stack of club flyers. "Just promise me you'll look through these. Sometimes the best parts of high school happen outside the classroom." Elena took the flyers and left, knowing she would never join any of them. Clubs meant visibility, commitment, roots. She had learned not to plant those. The week progressed with a steady escalation of incidents. Her gym clothes disappeared from her locker during PE, forcing her to participate in class, wearing her regular clothes. Her lunch tray was knocked from her hands in the cafeteria, sending food everywhere while Carter's crew laughed. Someone wrote "loser" on her locker in permanent marker through it all. Elena maintained her facade of calm indifference, but the effort was exhausting. It wasn't the harassment itself. She had endured worse. It was the constant performance of weakness, the deliberate suppression of every instinct to fight back. Every time Blake accidentally bumped into her, she had to consciously stop herself from the automatic defensive response. When Ethan tripped her in the hallway, she had to let herself fall instead of converting it into a roll. When Carter cornered her by her locker, she had to appear intimidated instead of calculating exactly how she could neutralize him in 3 moves or less. The breaking point was building. She could feel it. Not in her. She had been trained to endure far more than teenage bullying, but in them. Her lack of response was becoming a challenge to their dominance. They needed her to break to validate their power. And when she didn't, they would push harder and harder until something gave way. It was Thursday, 3 weeks into the semester, when the situation shifted. Eleanor was walking to her car after school. Her parents had finally agreed to let her drive herself when she noticed she wasn't alone. Carter's BMW was following her slowly through the parking lot, Blake hanging out the passenger window. "Hey, Eleanor," Blake called. "Need a ride?" She kept walking, keys in her hand. "Don't be rude," Ethan said from the back seat. "We're trying to be friendly." The car pulled ahead of her, blocking her path to her beat-up Honda Civic. Carter got out, leaving the engine running. "We need to talk," he said, his usual smirk replaced by something harder. "About what?" Elena asked, stopping a safe distance away. "About your attitude. See, there's a natural order to things at Riverside, and you're disrupting it. By existing, by thinking you're better than everyone else, walking around like you're untouchable, like nothing we do matters. I just want to be left alone." "That's not how it works," Blake said, getting out of the car as well. "You don't get to opt out. Everyone has a place in the hierarchy. You either accept yours at the bottom, or we put you there. And if I don't..." Ethan was out of the car now too, the 3 of them forming a loose semicircle around her. The parking lot was nearly empty, most students long gone. "Then we get creative," Carter said. "And trust me, we can be very creative." This was it, Elena realized. The moment where they would either back down or escalate to physical intimidation. She could see it in their body language, the way Blake was flexing his hands, the way Ethan kept glancing around to make sure they weren't being watched. They were psyching themselves up for something. "I need to go," she said, trying to step around them. Blake moved to block her. "We're not done talking." "Yes, we are." She tried to push past him, and he grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to leave marks, but firmly enough to establish physical dominance. Every fibre of her training screamed at her to break the grip, to put him on the ground, to show them exactly who they were messing with. But she forced herself to simply pull away. "Don't touch me." "Or what?" Blake asked, grabbing her arm again, harder this time. "Let go." "Make me." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Eleanor looked at each of them in turn, memorizing their positions, their stances, their weaknesses. Blake was all upper body strength, no balance. Ethan was too tense, would telegraph every move. Carter was overconfident, would expect compliance rather than resistance. She could take all 3 of them. It would be easy, satisfying. But then what? Suspension at best, expulsion at worst, criminal charges, potentially, depending on how badly she hurt them, her father's disappointment. Another move, another school, another fresh start, ruined. "Please," she said, making her voice small and scared. "Just let me go." Blake laughed and released her arm with a small shove. "That's better." "Remember your place, freak." They got back in the BMW and peeled out, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot. Elena waited until they were gone, then got in her car and drove home with white knuckles on the steering wheel. That night, her father knew something was wrong the moment she walked into the garage for training. What happened? She told him about the parking lot encounter, about Blake grabbing her, about how close she had come to breaking cover. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "He put his hands on you." "It wasn't. It was intimidation, not assault." "He grabbed you against your will." "That's assault." "Dad, please don't make this worse." "Eleanor, there are limits. I've let you handle this your way, but if they're getting physical, I can handle it. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to." "Let me talk to the school." "No, that will only make things worse. I just need to get through the year." Daniel studied his daughter's face, seeing the exhaustion beneath the determination. "The hardest fights," he said finally, "are the ones we choose not to have." "But Eleanor, there's no honor in being a punching bag." "I'm not a punching bag. I'm choosing not to engage. There's a difference. Is there? Or are you just so afraid of standing out that you're willing to endure anything to remain invisible?" The question stung because there was truth in it. Elena had become so accustomed to hiding, to minimizing herself, that she sometimes wondered if she had forgotten how to be anything else. Friday came with an ominous quiet. Carter and his crew were still there, still watching her, but they kept their distance. It felt like the calm before a storm, that electric silence that precedes something significant. Eleanor moved through her classes with heightened awareness, every sense alert for the next escalation. It came after school. She had stayed late to work on a chemistry project, taking advantage of the quiet lab when most students had fled for the weekend. Jade had offered to stay with her, but Eleanor had insisted she was fine. The school was nearly empty by the time she packed up, just a few teachers grading papers and the custodial staff beginning their evening routine. She was heading down the west stairwell, the one she usually avoided because of its isolation, when she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could react, someone pushed her hard from behind. She caught herself on the railing, her training keeping her from falling, but forced herself to stumble anyway, maintaining her cover. "Thought you could avoid us?" She turned to find Carter at the top of the stairs, with Blake and Ethan flanking him. They descended slowly, deliberately, savouring her perceived trapped position. "The school has cameras," Elena said, trying to inject the right amount of fear into her voice. "Not in this stairwell," Ethan said. "Budget cuts? They'd been broken for months. They had done their homework. This was planned, calculated." "What do you want?" Elena asked. "Respect," Carter said. "Acknowledgement. You need to understand that we run this school, and anyone who doesn't fall in line gets taught a lesson." "I haven't done anything to you." "Your existence is enough," Blake said, moving closer. "Looking at us like we're beneath you, acting like you're too good to even react to us." "That's not—" "Shut up," Carter cut her off. "We're done talking. You're going to learn your place, one way or another." Blake reached for her again, but this time his intentions were different. His hand moved not for her arm, but lower toward her chest. "Maybe she just needs some attention," he said with an ugly laugh. "Show her what she's missing by being such a stuck-up." The word never finished. Elena's body moved before her mind could stop it. 10 years of training took over, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. She grabbed Blake's wrist, twisted, and used his own momentum to drive him face-first into the wall. The impact was solid, controlled, designed to stun rather than seriously injure. Carter lunged at her, but she was already moving. A simple sweep took his legs out from under him, and he hit the floor hard, the air leaving his lungs in a whoosh. Ethan came at her with a wild swing that she ducked easily, grabbing his arm and flipping him over her hip in a textbook judo throw. The entire encounter lasted maybe 5 seconds. Eleanor stood in the center of the stairwell, her breathing calm, her stance balanced. The three boys were on the ground, groaning, trying to process what had just happened. Blake was holding his face, blood dripping from his nose. Carter was gasping, trying to get air back into his lungs. Ethan was curled on his side, the wind completely knocked out of him. "Don't," Elena said, her voice low and controlled, "ever touch me again." She stepped over Carter and walked down the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. It was only when she reached her car that the adrenaline hit, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her keys. She had blown her cover, revealed her capabilities, changed everything in a moment of instinctive self-defense. But she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The weekend passed in a haze of anxiety. Elena expected phone calls, police visits, some form of retaliation. But nothing came. She trained with her father, who listened to her account with a mixture of pride and concern. "You did what you had to do," he said. "When someone crosses that line, all bets are off." "I could have maintained cover. You could have been assaulted. You defended yourself appropriately. End of story." But it wasn't the end of the story, and they both knew it. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Elena walked into school expecting stares, whispers, confrontation. What she found was something else entirely. The hallways parted for her. Students stepped aside as she passed, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, and curiosity. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, then resumed in hushed tones once she had passed. "Is it true?" Jade appeared at her locker, eyes wide. "Did you really take down all three of them? How did you—" "Everyone knows. Someone saw them leaving school Friday. Blake had a bloody nose, Ethan was limping, and Carter looked like he'd been hit by a truck. And then someone remembered seeing you leave right after them, completely fine. It's not what people think." "Did they attack you?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. "Then you defended yourself." "That's amazing. Do you know how many people they've terrorized? How many kids have transferred because of them? And you fought back." Before Elena could respond, the PA system crackled to life. "Elena Torres, please report to the principal's office immediately. Elena Torres to the principal's office." The walk to the office felt like a funeral march. Students watched from doorways and lockers, their expressions unreadable. Elena kept her head up, refusing to appear ashamed of defending herself. Principal Morgan's office was crowded. Carter, Blake and Ethan were there with their parents, well-dressed adults with the kind of entitled expressions that explain their son's behaviour. Eleanor's parents were there too, her father in his military dress uniform, her mother clutching her purse like a weapon. "Sit down, Miss Torres," Principal Morgan said, her expression stern. Eleanor sat between her parents, feeling the tension in the room like a physical weight. "We have a serious situation," the principal continued. "These three young men have accused you of unprovoked assault." "That's a lie," Eleanor said calmly. "She attacked us," Blake burst out, his nose still swollen. "Out of nowhere. Is that so?" Principal Morgan pulled out a tablet. "Because I've been reviewing some interesting footage from Friday afternoon." The room went silent. "What footage?" Carter's father demanded. "My son said the cameras in that stairwell were broken." "The cameras in the stairwell are indeed non-functional," Principal Morgan agreed. "However, the camera at the end of the hallway that shows who enters and exits the stairwell is working perfectly." She turned the tablet around. The footage showed Eleanor entering the stairwell first, followed moments later by the three boys. Then, minutes later, it showed Elena leaving calmly while the boys stumbled out, clearly injured. "This proves nothing," Ethan's mother said. "They could have fallen." "Or," Principal Morgan interrupted, "I could read the nurse's report from this morning when Blake came in for pain medication. Would you like me to read the part where he admitted to her that they cornered Miss Torres?" Or perhaps the text messages between the three boys planning to teach her a lesson that another student brought to my attention. The parents shifted uncomfortably. Furthermore, the principal continued, I've had multiple students come forward over the weekend to report patterns of harassment and bullying by your sons toward Miss Torres and others. Photos left on her locker, destroyed property, physical intimidation. She pulled out a file that Elena recognized. Someone had found and reported the photos and notes she had been collecting. Your sons have been systematically tormenting this young woman for weeks, and when she finally defended herself against what appears to be an attempted assault, they want to play the victims. You can't prove, Carter's father started. I have 47 written statements from students and 5 from teachers documenting your son's behavior, Principal Morgan said coldly. I have physical evidence of harassment, and I have security video that shows 3 male students following a female student into an isolated area. She turned to Eleanor. Miss Torres, would you like to press charges for assault and harassment? Eleanor looked at the 3 boys. Blake wouldn't meet her eyes. Ethan was staring at the floor. Carter was glaring at her with undisguised hatred. No, she said finally. I just want to be left alone. That's very generous of you, Principal Morgan said. However, the school will be taking action. All 3 boys are suspended for 3 weeks, effective immediately. When they return, they'll be on strict probation. Any further incidents will result in expulsion. Additionally, she looked at Blake, the inappropriate touching you attempted constitutes sexual assault. You'll be required to attend counselling and sensitivity training. This is outrageous, Blake's father exploded. You're taking the word of... I'm taking the evidence, Principal Morgan cut him off. And frankly, your sons are lucky Miss Torres isn't pressing charges. From what I understand, she showed remarkable restraint in only defending herself to the extent necessary to escape. She turned to Elena's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Torres, I apologize that your daughter was subjected to this treatment at our school. We failed in our duty to provide a safe environment, and I take full responsibility for that failure. What about her? Carter's mother demanded. She assaulted our boys. She defended herself against 3 larger, older students who had cornered her in an isolated location after weeks of documented harassment, Principal Morgan said firmly. Under our zero-tolerance policy for bullying and sexual assault, she was well within her rights. In fact, she looked at Eleanor with something that might have been approval. I'm impressed by her restraint. Many people would have done far worse in that situation. The meeting ended with the 3 families leaving in various states of anger and humiliation. Elena and her parents stayed behind. I owe you an additional apology, Principal Morgan said once they were alone. When you came to see Mr. Martinez and said everything was fine, we should have looked closer. The signs were there. I didn't want to make waves, Eleanor said. I understand, but I hope you know now that you don't have to handle everything alone. And Miss Torres, your self-defense skills are quite impressive. Have you ever considered teaching others? Teaching? We have a women's self-defense club that could use someone with actual expertise. It's currently run by a well-meaning but undertrained volunteer. Perhaps you'd consider taking it over? Elena looked at her parents, who nodded encouragingly. I'll think about it, she said. The walk back to class felt different from the walk to the office. The stares were still there, but now they were mixed with something else: respect, admiration, even hope. Elena had done what so many had dreamed of, but never dared. She had stood up to the untouchable trio and won. Jade was waiting outside her chemistry class. So, what happened? They're suspended for 3 weeks. Jade let out a whoop that drew stares from passing students. This is the best day ever. Do you know what this means? People can actually relax for 3 weeks. No one looking over their shoulder, no one afraid of becoming the next target. It's just a suspension. They'll be back. Yeah, but different. Everyone knows now that they're not invincible, that someone can fight back, that someone did fight back. The rest of the day was surreal. Students approached Elena throughout the day, some to thank her, some to share their own stories of harassment, some just to look at her with awe. The quiet, nerdy new girl had turned out to be a warrior in disguise. In PE, Coach Sullivan pulled her aside. "I knew something was off about your fitness test results," he said with a grin. "No one with reflexes like yours struggles with 15 push-ups. How long have you been training?" 10 years, Elena admitted, seeing no point in lying anymore. "Martial arts, BJJ, and MMA primarily." He whistled. "And you've been hiding it this whole time?" "I don't like attention." "Well, you've got it now. Might as well use it for good. Principal Morgan mentioned the self-defense club. You should do it. A lot of kids here could benefit from learning to protect themselves." The lunch period brought another surprise. Elena was heading to her usual spot in the library when a group of girls intercepted her. "Sit with us," one of them said. It wasn't really a request. Elena found herself at a table surrounded by girls she had never spoken to before, all of them looking at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration. "Show us," one demanded. "Show you what?" "The move. The one you used on Blake." "I can't just—" "Please," another girl said, and her voice was different, quieter. "He cornered me last year. Nothing happened, but only because a teacher walked by. I've been terrified of him ever since." Elena looked around the table and saw similar stories in several faces. These weren't just curious spectators. These were victims, survivors, people who had been where she was but hadn't been able to fight back. "I can't demonstrate here," she said, "but if you come to the self-defense club, I'll teach you." "You're going to run it?" Eleanor made a decision. "Yes, starting next week." The table erupted in excited chatter. Plans were made, schedules compared, promises to spread the word extracted. For the first time since arriving at Riverside, Elena felt something she hadn't expected. Connection. Not friendship exactly, not yet, but the beginning of something. The 3 weeks of the boys' suspension passed quickly. The Self-Defense Club's first meeting drew 62 students, mostly but not exclusively girls. Elena started with basics: awareness, escape techniques, using your voice as a weapon. She demonstrated on volunteers, careful to show rather than tell, to empower rather than frighten. "The goal isn't to win a fight," she explained, unconsciously echoing her father's words. "It's to create an opportunity to escape. You don't have to be stronger than your attacker. You just have to be smarter." She taught them to identify pressure points, to use leverage instead of strength, to turn an attacker's size against them. But more than techniques, she taught them confidence. The way they walked through the halls began to change. Heads higher, steps more certain, voices stronger. Jade became her assistant, enthusiastic if not particularly coordinated. "I'm never going to be a ninja like you," she said after a particularly clumsy attempted throw. "But at least now I know how to jam my keys in someone's eyes, if I need to." "That's not what I taught you." "No, but it's what I took from it." "Use whatever weapons you have, right?" The day Carter, Blake and Ethan returned to school was tense. Elena saw them in the hallway, walking with none of their former swagger. Blake actually stepped aside when he saw her coming, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor. Ethan gave her a wide berth, nearly pressing himself against the lockers to avoid any chance of contact. Carter was different. He met her eyes, and she saw something there she didn't expect. Not hatred, not fear, but something like respect mixed with resentment. He nodded almost imperceptibly, an acknowledgement of something. Then he was gone, and their paths didn't cross again that day. The change in the school's dynamic was noticeable. Without the trio's reign of terror, students were more relaxed, more open. clubs that had been struggling for membership suddenly flourished. The kids who had been frequent targets began to walk with more confidence. It was as if Elena's actions had broken some kind of spell, showing everyone that the bullies were just teenage boys, not untouchable gods. 4 weeks after the incident, Eleanor was approached by an unexpected visitor after self-defense club. Carter stood in the doorway, alone, his usual confidence replaced by something uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked. Elena nodded to Jade that it was okay and followed him into the hallway. "I wanted to," he started, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't easy for me." "Then why do it?" "Because my suspension gave me time to think about who I am, who I've been. I didn't like what I saw." Elena waited, saying nothing. "My dad," Carter continued, "he's always pushed me to be tough, to dominate, to never show weakness, and I thought that meant making others feel weak. Blake and Ethan, they just followed my lead. If I hadn't started it all—" "Everyone makes choices," Elena said. "They made theirs." "Yeah, but I made it easy for them to choose wrong." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry. For everything. The harassment, the intimidation, what happened in the stairwell, especially Blake crossing that line. I should have stopped him." "You should have," Elena agreed. "I know apologizing doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be different. Better." "Prove it," Elena said simply. "How?" She thought for a moment. "There are 53 students in this school who transferred or nearly transferred because of you and your friends. Apologize to them. Make amends. And next time you see someone being bullied, don't just walk by. Stop it." Carter nodded slowly. "That's fair." As he walked away, Elena called after him. "Carter." He turned. "Change is possible, but it requires constant choice. Every day, every interaction. It's not one grand gesture. It's 1,000 small decisions to be better than you were." Something in his expression shifted. "Is that how you learned to fight?" "No," Elena said. "That's how I learned not to." The rest of the semester progressed with a new equilibrium. Blake transferred schools, unable to face the daily reminder of his humiliation and the consequences of his actions. Ethan retreated into himself, joining the art club and discovering he had actual talent when he wasn't using it for cruelty. Carter began the slow work of redemption, apologizing to former victims, calling out bullying when he saw it, using his former position of power to protect rather than torment. The self-defense club grew to over 80 regular members. Elena taught them physical techniques, but more importantly, she taught them strength. Not the kind that came from muscles or training, but the kind that came from knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. One evening, as she was cleaning up after a particularly energetic session, Principal Morgan stopped by. "You've made quite an impact, Miss Torres." "I just taught them some moves." "You taught them to stand up for themselves." "Do you know our bullying incidents have decreased by 75% this semester? Our transfer requests are down to 0. And yesterday I saw a freshman tell a senior to back off when he was hassling another student. The freshman was half his size, but she stood her ground, and the senior walked away." "That's good to hear." "It's more than good. It's transformative. You've changed the culture of this school." Elena felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what I had to do." "No," Principal Morgan corrected. "You did what was right, even when it meant giving up your anonymity, even when it meant becoming visible in a way you clearly didn't want to be. That takes a different kind of courage than fighting." As winter turned to spring, Eleanor found herself settling into Riverside in a way she had never settled anywhere before. She had friends, real friends, not just friendly acquaintances. Jade had become her best friend, their bond forged through shared experiences and genuine affection. The self-defense club had become a community, a place where students supported each other beyond just learning techniques. Even her parents noticed the change. "You seem happy," her mother observed one evening over dinner. "I guess I am," Eleanor admitted, somewhat surprised by the realization. "It's nice to see you coming out of your shell," Maria added, "making connections." "Even if those connections started with me beating up 3 seniors," Elena said. "Especially because of that," Daniel said with a grin. "You found your people by being yourself, not by hiding who you are." One day in late spring, Elena was eating lunch with Jade and several other friends from the self-defense club when Carter approached their table. The conversation died immediately, old habits hard to break. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quickly. "I just wanted to tell Elena something." Everyone looked at Elena, who nodded for him to continue. "I got into Berkeley," he said. "Full scholarship." "That's great," Elena said, genuinely meaning it. "The essay that got me in was about this year. About learning that real strength isn't about domination, but about lifting others up. About how a girl half my size taught me the most important lesson of my life. That everyone deserves respect and dignity, and that true power comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves." He pulled out a folded paper and handed it to her. "I wanted you to read it, to make sure I got it right." Eleanor took the paper, surprised by the gesture. "Also," Carter added, addressing the entire table now, "I'm organising an anti-bullying workshop for incoming freshmen next year. I was hoping some of you might help. Share your experiences. Teach them that Riverside doesn't tolerate that behaviour anymore." "You want us to help you?" Jade asked skeptically. "I want to make sure what I did never happens again," Carter said simply. "And I figure the best way to do that is to listen to the people I hurt and learn from them." It was a start, Elena thought. Not absolution, not forgiveness necessarily, but a start. As the school year drew to a close, Elena found herself reflecting on how differently everything had turned out from what she had expected. She had come to Riverside planning to be invisible, to endure, to survive until the next move. Instead, she had found a place where she belonged, not by hiding, but by revealing herself. Not by accepting the status quo, but by changing it. The last self-defense club meeting of the year was emotional. Students shared stories of how the club had changed them, how they had used what they had learned not just to protect themselves physically, but to stand up for themselves in all aspects of their lives. "You gave us our power back," one girl said, tears in her eyes. "I had forgotten I had any." "You always had it," Elena corrected. "I just showed you how to use it." After everyone had left, Elena stood alone in the gym, remembering that day in the stairwell when everything had changed. She had spent so long hiding her strength, afraid of standing out, afraid of the attention it would bring. But in revealing that strength, she had found something she hadn't expected. Not just acceptance, but purpose. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Training in 10 minutes, don't be late. Some things," she thought with a smile, "never changed." As she headed home, Elena passed the west stairwell where everything had shifted. She paused, remembering the fear she had felt, the moment of decision, the clarity that had come with finally defending herself fully. A voice behind her made her turn. It was the freshman girl from the self-defense club, the quiet one who barely spoke but never missed a session. "Miss Eleanor," the girl said hesitantly. "Just Eleanor," she corrected gently. "I wanted to thank you, not just for the club, but for showing me it's okay to be strong. My whole life people told me to be quiet, be small, don't make waves. But you showed me that sometimes making waves is the only way to change things. Sometimes the biggest wave you can make is simply refusing to be pushed around," Elena said. The girl nodded, then hurried off to catch up with her friends. Elena watched her go, noting the confident stride, the straight spine, the head held high. Another person discovering their own strength. Summer arrived with promises of change. Eleanor's father received orders. They would be moving again, but not until after Eleanor's senior year. For the first time, she had the promise of finishing high school in one place, of seeing things through to the end. "You could actually have a normal senior year," her mother said excitedly. "Prom, graduation parties, all of it." "I don't know if I know how to do normal," Eleanor admitted. "Sure you do," Jade said. She had come over for dinner, a regular occurrence now. "Normal is just what we make it, and our normal includes a bunch of badass kids who know how to defend themselves, reformed bullies actually trying to be better people, and a school where everyone watches out for each other. That's our normal." The summer passed quickly. Elena taught at a local MMA gym, working with kids who reminded her of herself at that age. Small, uncertain, searching for strength. She taught them the same lessons her father had taught her, the same ones she had passed on to the self-defense club. Strength wasn't about domination. It was about discipline, control, and knowing when not to fight. Carter kept his word about the anti-bullying workshop. He recruited Elena, Jade, and several others to help plan and execute it. It was awkward at first, working with someone who had made their lives miserable, but Carter's commitment seemed genuine. He listened more than he talked, deferred to their experiences, and publicly owned his past behavior without excuses. "I was a bully," he said to the assembled freshmen on the first day of school. "I terrorized people because I could, because it made me feel powerful. And then someone stood up to me. Actually, she knocked me flat on my back. And I realized that real power isn't about making others feel small. It's about lifting them up." He introduced Elena then, and she found herself standing in front of 300 freshmen, all looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and awe. The legend of the stairwell incident had grown over the summer, reaching mythic proportions. "I'm not a superhero," she said, addressing the elephant in the room. "I'm not special. I'm someone who trained hard and was forced to use that training. But the most important thing I learned wasn't how to fight. It was that everyone has the right to feel safe, to be respected, to exist without fear. And sometimes ensuring that right requires standing up to those who would deny it." The workshop was a success. The freshmen left with a clear understanding that bullying wouldn't be tolerated, not by the administration, not by the older students, and not by each other. The culture of Riverside had shifted fundamentally. Senior year began with Elena in a position she had never imagined, visible, respected, even sought after. Colleges had heard about her work with the Self-Defense Club and anti-bullying initiatives. She received recruitment letters from schools with strong criminal justice and social work programs, seeing in her someone who could make a real difference. The Self-Defense Club had become so popular they had to split it into beginner and advanced sections. Eleanor taught the advanced group, focusing not just on physical techniques, but on the philosophy behind them. She brought in guest instructors, police officers, social workers, survivors of assault, to provide different perspectives. Ethan surprised everyone by becoming one of the club's most dedicated members. He had spent the summer in therapy, working through issues that had led to his cruel behavior. "I was angry at everything," he told Elena one day after practice, "and instead of dealing with it, I took it out on anyone I saw as weaker. You showing me I wasn't as strong as I thought, it was a wake-up call." He had also discovered that his artistic talents extended beyond cruel caricatures. His graphic novel about redemption and second chances had won a state competition, and he was heading to art school after graduation. As fall turned to winter, Elena found herself part of something she had never experienced before: traditions. Homecoming, where she went with a group of friends rather than a date, all of them wearing matching Self-Defense Club t-shirts as a joke. The winter formal, where Carter publicly apologized to every person he had bullied, one by one, in front of the entire school. It was awkward and uncomfortable, but it was also necessary, a public acknowledgement of harm done and responsibility taken. "You don't have to forgive me," he said to each person. "But I want you to know that I know what I did was wrong, and I'm sorry." Some accepted his apology, others didn't. But everyone appreciated the gesture, the public ownership of his actions. College acceptance letters started arriving in spring. Elena got into her top choice, a school with a renowned criminal justice program where she could combine her physical training with academic study of conflict resolution and victim advocacy. Jade was heading to the same state, different school, but close enough that they could remain friends. "Promise me we won't lose touch," Jade said, as they sat together at lunch, surrounded by acceptance letters and course catalogues. "We won't," Elena promised. "You're stuck with me now." The final self-defense club meeting of Elena's high school career was packed. Students, parents, even some teachers and school board members came to see what had become a cornerstone of Riverside's culture. Elena demonstrated techniques, but more importantly, she talked about the journey from hiding her abilities to using them, from isolation to community, from fear to strength. "Every person in this room has power," she said. "Physical, emotional, intellectual, social. The question isn't whether you have power, but how you choose to use it. You can use it to dominate, to harm, to tear down. Or you can use it to protect, to build up, to create spaces where everyone can thrive. The choice is always yours." Principal Morgan presented her with an award, the first annual Riverside Courage Award, created specifically to honor a student who stood up for others at personal cost. "This young woman changed our school," the principal said, "not through force or fear, but through example. She showed us that one person standing up can inspire dozens to do the same. She turned victims into victors, bullies into allies, and a culture of fear into one of mutual respect." Elena accepted the award uncomfortably, still not entirely at ease with public recognition. But as she looked out at the crowd, her parents beaming with pride, Jade wiping away tears, even Carter applauding genuinely, she realized that visibility wasn't the burden she had thought it was. It was a responsibility, yes, but also an opportunity. Prom arrived with all the fanfare typical of such events. Elena went with a group of friends from the self-defense club, all of them having decided that dates were overrated and group solidarity was more fun. She wore a simple dress that her mother had helped her pick out, one that allowed for movement because even at prom, she couldn't completely turn off her tactical awareness. The night was perfect in its imperfection: bad music, worse food, awkward dancing, and moments of genuine joy. When they announced prom court, Elena was shocked to hear her name called for prom queen. She tried to decline, but Jade literally pushed her onto the stage. Standing there, crown slightly askew on her head because of course it didn't fit properly, Elena looked out at her classmates and saw not the strangers she had expected to remain, but friends, allies, people she had influenced and who had influenced her in return. "I'm not really a speech person," she said into the microphone, "but I guess I want to say that when I came to Riverside, I planned to be invisible, to get through without being noticed. Instead, I found that sometimes being visible is how we light the way for others. So thank you for seeing me, for letting me see you, and for proving that change is possible when we stand together." The crowd erupted in applause. Even Carter, standing at the back with his date, raised his glass in a genuine toast. Graduation day was bittersweet. Eleanor sat with her class, no longer the outsider, but an integral part of the Riverside story. When they called her name, the applause was thunderous. She had won several awards: the Courage Award again, an Excellence in Leadership Award, and a special recognition for her impact on school culture. As she walked across the stage, Elena caught sight of 4 freshman girls in the audience wearing self-defense club t-shirts, watching her with the same expression she probably had watching her father demonstrate techniques all those years ago. Admiration mixed with determination to be that strong themselves. After the ceremony, in the chaos of families and photos, Blake approached her. He had come back for graduation, though he had finished his senior year at another school. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly, properly. "What I did, what I tried to do, there's no excuse for it." "No," Eleanor agreed. "There isn't." I've been in counselling, trying to understand why I thought that was okay, why I felt entitled to—" He trailed off. "Anyway, I wanted you to know that you changed my life. Not in a good way at first. I was angry, humiliated. But eventually I realized you had shown me who I really was, and I didn't like what I saw. So I'm trying to be better." "Good," Eleanor said simply. "Keep trying." As he walked away, Jade appeared at her side. That must have been hard for him. "Good," Elena repeated. "Growth should be hard. Change should cost something. Otherwise, it's just performance." The summer after graduation was a whirlwind of preparation for college, final training sessions with her father, and saying goodbye to the place that had become unexpectedly home. The self-defense club would continue. Several juniors had been trained to take over, and Principal Morgan had hired a professional instructor to oversee it. On her last night in town, Elena stood in the empty gym where she had taught so many students to find their strength. Carter found her there, having come to say his own goodbye. "I never thanked you," he said, "for knocking me on my arse. For showing me I needed to be knocked on my arse. For proving that actions have consequences. For demonstrating what real strength looks like." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "We could have been friends," Carter said finally, "if I hadn't been such a massive jerk when you arrived. You're actually pretty cool." "We are friends," Elena corrected. "We're friends now. It just took a really rocky path to get here." "Do you regret it? Having to reveal yourself? Giving up being invisible?" Elena thought about it. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that you and your friends created an environment where I had to choose between my safety and my anonymity. But I don't regret the choice I made. It led to something better than invisibility." "What's that?" "Community, purpose, the knowledge that I could make a difference." As she drove away from Riverside for the last time, Elena thought about the girl who had arrived 2 years ago, determined to remain unseen and unchanged. That girl had been afraid, not of physical confrontation, but of connection, of putting down roots only to have them ripped up again. But roots, she had learned, weren't just about place. They were about people, about impact, about the changes you created that persisted even after you left. The self-defense club would continue. The culture of the school had permanently shifted. Lives had been changed, including her own. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jade. "Just saw 4 freshmen practicing the wrist grab escape you taught us in the park. Your legacy lives on, Ninja Girl." Elena smiled. She had come to Riverside as nobody from nowhere, planning to leave the same way. Instead, she was leaving as somebody who had made a difference, who had stood up when it mattered, who had chosen visibility over safety and found strength in community rather than isolation. The shy new girl was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, more connected. Someone who understood that true strength wasn't just about the ability to fight, but about the courage to be seen, to stand up, to create change, even when it meant sacrificing the comfortable invisibility she had wrapped around herself like armor. As she pulled onto the highway, heading toward college and her next chapter, Elena thought about all the future students who would walk through Riverside's halls without fear, who would know they had the right to exist without harassment, who would understand that everyone had power and the choice of how to use it. That was her true legacy. Not the legend of the stairwell fight, not the viral story of the girl who took down 3 bullies, but the fundamental shift in what was acceptable, what was possible, and what strength really meant. And as the miles passed and Riverside faded into memory, Elena realized she wasn't leaving anything behind. She was carrying it all with her. The lessons learned, the connections made, the strength found not in hiding, but in standing tall and refusing to be anything less than exactly who she was. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Elena wasn't planning to navigate it alone. She had friends, mentors, a community that extended beyond geography. She had the knowledge that she could create change, that one person standing up really could make a difference. Most importantly, she had herself, no longer hidden, no longer diminished, no longer afraid of being seen. She was Elena Torres, and she was finally, fully, unapologetically visible. And that, she thought as she drove toward her future, made all the difference.